Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to kind of take a better look at that AL box. We're going to run a couple profitability numbers, some theoreticals, run some numbers, just to really see if this thing is worthwhile. We did have a couple days to kind of sit on it, see what we feel, see what kind of vibes we're getting, right? So we're going to talk about it, talk about all the things to factor in, and why or why not this may be a buy, right? So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get right to this thing. So the biggest thing, number one, when we talk about profitability and all this stuff, focus on the yield. Okay, there's going to be a lot of games with the price action, and it already started from day one. Right when this thing was announced, what happened? We were in the 220 range, and literally an hour after, and then not too long after, over $3. You're going to see a lot of this. Okay, so even as these units come out, they come in hand, the yield goes down. It's possible that the profitability still stays in that same range or continues to go up if Alephium's price action continues upwards, kind of giving you the false sense of profitability. Okay, maybe it's real price action, maybe it's not, but it's just extremely funny that when it went to that $3 range, it was just enough to get it to be number one on Mine the ASIC for profitability goes. Currently number two because it did retrace down in the 280s, but kind of funny how that worked, how it hit that price point just enough to get it up there. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of, not necessarily manipulation from them, but there's going to be a lot of games. Okay, whether it's them or not, who knows, but just kind of keep those things in mind. Okay, so as far as price goes, we don't really know yet. They haven't given us any hints. The only thing we know is that a couple of vendors did list in this range, and it could be just because one is guesstimating it at this range and the others kind of followed. Okay, so Miner Bros put it at 9,300, ASIC Marketplace at 9K, which kind of funny with these guys, they always list at the exact same time. ASIC Marketplace always undercuts them by a couple $100. Literally every new release has been like that. Kind of weird. Not just short term, this has been for quite a while. I don't know if there's any kind of link with them or what's going on there, but regardless, they have it at that price. And then our BFFs at Viperatech, shout out to any of you guys who remember the issues we had with them. But they have it listed at 10,800, and I think it's just kind of jumping in line with these guys, or maybe they do know something, who knows. One thing to know in their description, they have it as this is a pre-order for the May production batch with delivery in June. So is that giving us some insight? Potentially, maybe, or are they full of BS? Potentially, maybe also, right? So just some things to consider there. So as far as when we look at whether this guy is worth it or not, obviously when we look at the profitability, man, it looks great, but we all know that's not what it's going to be, okay? So a couple of big factors, right? Because I've been seeing, the comments, what people were thinking about it, so I'm going to make a couple comments regarding those. One, a lot of people are saying, oh, when the Bitmain unit comes out, it's going to be so much more efficient. To me, it's going to be the same game as with Caspa. Efficiency, honestly, not going to really be a factor. What is going to be the biggest factor, and my metric for judging whether things are going to be worth it or not, is the dollars per hash. Just like with Caspa ASIC mining, these things are going to be so profitable, the electric doesn't matter. I mean, you can see it right here. Your income right here is $128 a day. 43 cents electric. Who cares? If it was double the wattage and half the efficiency, 86 cents. Who freaking cares? Okay, and it's going to be like this for a while, just like it was with Caspa. We're like 10 months into Caspa ASIC mining. Electric, in most cases, still does not freaking matter. Okay, so it's going to be kind of the same thing here. To me, again, the most important metric, just like with that, is going to be that dollars to hash ratio. How much hash can I get for my dollar? That's going to be the metric that's going to be most important to me when I decide, if I decide to get any of these things, okay? The other big thing is like, oh, well, this thing's only going to be 360 gigahash. The others are going to be, 20 times more. And yes, that's true, but you have to see if this thing is going to kind of scale along with it, right? Just like the way the KS0 kind of scaled in with the other units. If this guy scales, it's just going to be on a smaller scale, essentially. Okay, so just because it's a small amount doesn't mean it's not going to be worthwhile. It can be profitable for quite a period of time, but again, it's going to be like the KS0 and the KS0 Pro. What happened to them is people, yes, they were making good money. They made their money back, and then they made a little bit extra, and then from there, it's still profitable, but it's just not making a ton, right? So that's one of the things you have to factor in. So kind of for those reasons, this small of a unit isn't necessarily too appealing. What would be appealing is something more in the middle, like a KS1 or KS2 variant if Ice River were to follow the same kind of moniker. One of those units early on would be more appealing, or when one of the first bigger guys comes in, that could potentially be it, right? Because realistically, those were the biggest money makers because, again, it was a lot more hash rate, and being early, you're getting a lot more of that yield before the hash rate goes up significantly. Okay, so now when we look at the hash rate, it's currently at about 400 terahash. It's at 435. We're gonna do easy napkin math just to kind of get ballparks, okay? So the easiest way to do this is there are hash rate converters, right? So this is from coinguides.org. I've used this one all the time. Kind of use it to kind of play around just because it makes it easier to visualize, you know, the gigahash, terahash, petahash, etc., right? So we know that this unit is going to be 360 gigahash, okay? Let's figure, just to make it easy math, they were to release about 1,100 units, right? Whether it's 1,100 units of this AL box, or maybe Ice River makes their announcement and there's actually ships around the same time as this guy, and they have a AL0, right? Which is, again, a smaller scale unit, nothing huge. So I'm going to kind of factor those things in and think realistically 1,100 units between them. Maybe if IB Link releases a mini, that's a somewhat realistic number, and that's if those units come out around the same time frame. Maybe it's only GoldShell for the first 2-3 months before anybody else comes in. Who knows? But that's kind of a guesstimate we're going to put it at. Realistically, it could be 100 units. It could be 2,000 units. We don't really know, so I'm going to kind of go in the middle here, right? So the easiest way to do that is multiply the amount of units by the hash rate, right? So in this case, we're ballparking 1,100 units, and we're going to multiply it by the 360 gigahash. Okay, so that gives us a total of 396,000 gigahash. So when we punch it in here, it gives us a total of right around 400 terahash, which is what? Well, we're ballparking the current hash rate to be. Okay, so if about 1,100 units, again, whether it's all AL boxes or AL zeros or the IB Link mini boxes, whatever, if that amount of units come on, that's all it's going to take to double the existing hash rate, which would halve your rewards. Okay, so obviously if you get in the very first batch, you're maybe on the first 50, then initially you're going to get more. But this is more kind of to be like an average potentially for the first month or two maybe that they are out. Okay, so if we do it by that metric, we're currently yielding about 44 alpha a day. This would bring it down to about 22 alpha. Again, this isn't an exact. We're just ballparking, we're just playing with the numbers, okay? So now at that point, your current income would be cut in half, right? So it'd be about 64 bucks a day. Still not bad, okay? So let's multiply the amount of yield though, because again, we're not necessarily worried with the fiat value. We want to see how much yield we can get. That way we can do a fair comparison if we were to just buy Alephium outright at its current price, okay? Because to me, that's a big metric for as far as calculating your break even and such. That's the way I like to look at it, right? So again, if we are making 22 alpha a day, we multiply it, let's say an awesome scenario, we have 60 days of mining at this type of hash rate, right? So it'll be an average because earlier on, you're gonna make more, especially if you get earlier, but then the later, maybe after the second month, maybe more of these units come on, the second batches. So that's why it'll be kind of like an average throughout that time. So if we're making 22 alpha a day, we multiply it by 60 days, which is our 2 months. That would bring us to a total of 1,320 alpha. Okay, not too bad. Now, let's say the reason this isn't too hot is that if we have an absolute good scenario, right? Like a perfect scenario, we're getting our 44 alpha a day, which is what we're getting right now. So if you are the first one to get one, let's say GoldShell loves you, you are RPM, you get one, and you're able to mine on it for 30 days, which obviously we know is not going to be the case. So this is not even best case scenario. This is more of a dream scenario. Okay, we could do 44, which is what the current yield is, and let's say you get 30 days of that. That's also going to bring you to 1,320. Okay, the issue there is if this thing is $9,000. Okay, so $9,000 I'm going to divide it by the current price, which is about $2.87. That would get you about 3,135 Alephium. Okay. That's where it gets a little sketchy if 1320 ALF is like a dream scenario that you're able to mine that amount for a month straight. And it's not super likely that's going to happen. Okay. Let's say this unit is only $5,000 instead though, right? So let's see how much Alephium we can get for 5,000. So 5,000, dividing that by 1,000, no, by 287, $2.87, gives us the 1,742 ALF. Okay. So for me, for it to even remotely make sense, it would have to definitely be under 5. Realistically, maybe 2 to 3K would be where I would eye it at. Is that going to be something that's realistic? No. Okay. The reason it has to be super cheap for me is that these numbers, and for it to be this amount of time, is probably not too realistic, because the hash rate is probably going to climb higher this time faster, significantly faster than it did with Caspa, because there's just more eyes on it. Okay. Ice River's probably going to be able to scale better this time because, again, that first Caspa ASIC was kind of the trial run, right? So this time, if they do the same concept where they have AL0, AL1, AL2, the shells are already made. It's probably going to be similar size hash boards, similar PSUs, similar cooling setups. Like a lot of that was already done and experimented with Caspa. Meaning hopefully they're going to be able to scale faster, get these units out faster. And what is that going to do? It's going to increase the hash rate and difficulty faster. Add on top of the fact now that there's more than one manufacturer also, right? It was only with Caspa, it was only Ice River, and the Bitmains were coming farther down the road. And since Ice River was by itself, they controlled the tempo of the market. They were able to start with the smaller guys, and then, you know, those price cuts every month because the profitability was tanking, and they were able to control the flow. They're not going to have that kind of control this time because they're going to have GoldShell and IB Link most likely also making units. We don't know when. Maybe they have a 3 months heads up. Maybe they don't. Maybe next month. Everybody else makes their announcements. We don't freaking know. Okay, so there's a lot of things that can happen. So even if like the best case scenario happens like it did last time where Bitmain gets delayed, and realistically doesn't make it until like October, I think is when they finally started coming out. You're going to have these other manufacturers already on the ball because they know the money is there. They know the FOMO is going to be there. So they're going to be on it. Okay, so realistically, I think the hash rate will probably climb at a faster rate. So if you were to get any of these, to me, the money would be with a larger unit and just getting in early. You have to be like one of those first batches to really be able to take advantage and make a lot of that money just right off the rip. Okay, because like we saw, that hash rate is going to go up immensely, especially initially, just like we saw it with Caspa. Okay, so it's going to be kind of different. So it's going to be a lot of similarities, but it's also going to be very different because of that. Okay, so again, we can do some quick numbers. I was kind of going through the hash rate and kind of just getting a ballpark for how fast Caspa's hash rate was going up when it was coming out. Okay, and it was pretty like mind-blowingly fast. Initially though, it did take a little bit, right? There was a little bit of break of time. So the KS0 started coming in hand somewhere around mid-June. That's around when people started getting their pre-orders. So I wrote down a couple of the numbers. So June 1st, the hash rate was about 1.1 petahash. Okay. By July 22nd, so it did take a while for it to double. July 22nd is when it went up to 2.2. Okay, so between, you know, trial and error, getting their shipping and logistics down, it took them a while, but we can see how fast it scaled after that. So after July 22nd, that's when it went to 2.2 petahash. So at that point, almost 2 months, right? So all of June and then 3/4 of July. From there, though, it didn't take long for it to double again. So August 6th, that went up to 4.27 petahash. Okay. And then just a week later, went up to 8.81. So keep in mind that every time it doubles, your yield gets cut in half. So already at that point, August 14th, so from June 1st to August 14th, it has already 8x'd. Meaning from that initial yield you're getting, it's now an eighth of that. That is huge. Okay, so that's why it's not going to be super tempting when you're going from 44 and let's say it has a similar rate and it goes down an eighth, down to like 5. It's pretty significant. Okay, so that's definitely something you gotta consider. And then from there, it just continues also quickly. So from August 14th, it was 8.81. August 31st, so just 2 weeks later, 16.68. So doubled again. And then October 2nd, it doubled again. Okay, so the hardest hit is those first few months because the hash rate doubles. Your yield gets cut in half, extremely fast. As the network matures, it does take a lot more for your yield to get cut in half again because there's just a lot more hash rate now. Like for example, right now, Caspa is up to 200 petahash. So now for it to halve again, it has to hit 400 petahash, right? So it'll eventually get to that point where it takes a lot longer for you to get affected by the amount of units that come online. Is it still going to? Sure, yes. But again, we're like 10 months in already to this game and it's still immensely profitable. It's going to be something similar here. A lot of it's going to have to do with the price action though, right? So Caspa's price action went up. Like I was one of those who did not think that it would go up that high because of the sell pressure, right? Number one, I didn't think it'd go up that high, period. At least not now, maybe in the bull market. The fact that it made it that high, not saying Alephium won't, but I will not as bullish on it as I was on Caspa. Okay, so there are those factors. You have to consider sell pressure, especially if these units are going to be this much more expensive. There may be more immense sell pressure. At the same time, though, timing is completely different. During the Caspa time, that was deep bear market. Right now, we're going into super bull mode, right? Especially in the next 6 months, around the time where a lot of this stuff's going to be happening. Who knows where the price action goes? So you have to really see how freaking bullish you are on Alephium. Are you that bullish where you think it's going to be a top 50, top 40, top 30? Or do you think it'll be something where maybe it'll crack the top 100? That'll definitely have a big play in it as well. Especially if the units are going to be in this range. If they're freaking 9K. Okay, that's the equivalent. That's saying that, again, if the other ones are going to be, again, easy math. 20 times more hash rate. Is it going to be 20 times more expensive? You're saying it's going to be a $180,000 miner? Probably not. So that's why even just basing it off of that factor alone, is it going to be a $100,000 miner, the 3,500 water? Probably not either. Well, maybe actually. They're greedy as hell, but that would scale this at being half of that current price. So to me, it'd have to be maybe a quarter of that. 2,500 puts the other guy at like 50K. That I could see happening, right? So that's why also like it would have to be closer to that range. So realistically for me to consider maybe 2 to 3K, 2 to 3,500, that would be a price point I would maybe consider. But if it's anything beyond that, which again, if it's going to be anywhere near these prices, it's a tough sell, bros, right? Again, unless you're extremely bullish, you have to really just factor all those things in, okay? And these are all guesstimates. Who knows what ends up happening? Maybe GoldShell has it on lock for the next 3 to 4 months. Maybe the others are still super early in development and it's still quite a ways, right? Which it could be with Bitmain. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen with Bitmain. But now, again, there's just a lot more risk, right? Because is Ice River going to be primed? Ivy Link going to be primed? You're kind of betting on that fact. This is literally about as high risk as it gets. It's extremely degen. Extreme risk. Even more so, in my opinion, than the Caspa ones, right? Because again, there's so much more tension. We saw the formula. We saw the game plan. Everybody is seeing how much money these freaking manufacturers have made on these ASICs and continuing to make. I mean, Ice River is still releasing $12,000 ASICs, basics. Freaking Bitmain's releasing $30,000 ASICs nearly, 10 months later? They know the potential is here also, right? So there's a lot of potential money to be made. They're going to try to get their units out faster. I'm going to have to just see who wins this early race, right? It's potential that Bitmain is going to release theirs. Who knows if it's next month or if it's like 5 months down the road. Maybe it'll follow a similar release schedule also where it's farther down. or it's maybe towards the end of summer. Then at that point, okay, so like even if we're competing at the low end, we have GoldShell, we have Ice River, we have Ivy Link. Bang for the buck wise, the ones to me that have the game plan, it'd probably be Ice River. GoldShell does tend to price gouge quite a bit for quite a long period of time. Ice River, what I will give them extreme kudos for was the way they played the pricing game. They consistently just undercut Bitmain just enough to make you consider buying the Ice River before the Bitmain. Even though we had never really heard of Ice River, we have no idea if they were real, but it was just enough so to get you to consider. And as people saw that they were working, they went in. Now that we know they're working, we know they're somewhat legit. If it's a good chunk cheaper, they're going to control that market. So they know if the GoldShell, the AL box does come at this range, don't be surprised to see their AL0 be a similar concept, same exact frame as like the KS0, right? Because again, they already have that made. They already have the schematic. They already have that design. Don't be surprised to see them undercut these guys, right? Let's say it's a 90 watt version. So let's say it's half of that. Let's say 180 gigahash at 90 watts. And it's less than half of that. Let's say this guy is 9,000. Let's say not even 4,500. Let's say they come in at 2,500 to 3K. They may do that, right? Similar game plan is what they did with Bitmain. They're going to undercut them where they can. And these guys, we'll see where they price them at, but they're going to show their cards. Maybe Ice River's intentionally waiting. Maybe that's why they haven't restocked the KS1, KS2, because they're already in production mode for their variants of that, right? A lot of things to consider, and that's kind of what you're betting against. You're gambling against that. That's what you're literally betting against. The likelihood of how fast these other manufacturers are going to come out and at what prices. Okay, like we mentioned, you can buy this guy at 9K, pre-order it, gets delayed a little bit, and just like Viperatech said, doesn't ship out until June. Yeah, Ice River announces theirs sometime in May and actually starts shipping in May for a much cheaper price. You might get already wrecked before you even get the unit. Okay, which, I mean, it's something, and it's not out of the realm of possibility because that's what we saw with Bitmain. Look what Ice River forced them to do. They forced them to do those extreme price cuts from 40K range down to like 20K in the matter of like a weekend when they did that initial sale. And it's not because they wanted to. It's not because they wanted to screw out all the people who spent all that money. It's because they were forced to. The Ice Rivers were just so much more competitive in the price department. They had no other choice because they weren't getting any sales, right? So Ice River, to me, if they were to release like a 600 watt variant or a 1200 watt variant, something just like similar to the other schematic, that would probably be more where my eye would be. Either that or a similar strategy to with the Casp ASIC, where I get one of the higher end guys. Because again, those higher end guys are going to be better for a longer period of time. But it's all going to depend on the price point, right? I can theorize all this and, you know, maybe I'll get this, but if this is anywhere near where the price range is going to be, no go for me. Right? Again, because it'd have to be literally about a third for me to consider. And is it going to be a third? Probably not. Why? Because we're going to have all these people FOMOing in because they're seeing this price right here. So you got to look at those things. You got to look at how they kind of think. Like put your goggles on, like if you're running their business, right? And we know how GoldShell does. Regardless of what your opinion, they always price gouge. They're always on the higher end. They have no shame in their game. Just like with those freaking KD miners. Okay, they're going to price it out where they think it's going to sell. And again, if it sells, then freaking why not? And right now, because everybody has this FOMO and everything, it may happen. But again, be realistic. Look at how fast the rewards are likely to drop. Because again, 1,100 units, whether it's all AL boxes or it's an AL0 or it's an IB Link Mini, whatever, it's going to take 1,100 of those at this rate to double the hash rate and half the reward. So going from 44 ALF down to 22 ALF. Factor that in. So, and again, look at your yield, because again, yes, that may happen. It may cut in half, but then Alephium may go to $6 and the profitability remains the same, right? But again, you want to focus on that yield because that can all be like a mind game. And this is that 4D chess that we're talking about that like Ice River was playing that whole time, right? So there's going to be a lot of games with that because again, it is a smaller market cap. It is in the number 300s. It's not like what Caspa is right now where it's so expensive they're not manipulating that thing anymore. This guy, they potentially could. Stuff to think about. Tinfoil hat stuff there, but it is realistically possible. Okay, so just factor all those things. We have to really see where the price is. But again, for me, I have price points now. If it's 2 to 3K and I can get it ASAP for sure, it'd be a maybe. But realistically, for playing the game, the early game, I would probably wait for an ice river just because they've already played the game. They already know what to do. They're probably going to use a lot of the same components that they use for the ice river race, especially if they follow that same schematic where they release a 0, just like that, the same form factor, a 0 and a 1. The PSUs are made, the control boards are there. Like, it's going to be faster. They're going to be able to get these units out faster because a lot of the R&D was done. A lot of the headaches that I'm sure they learned along the way have been done also. The logistics is going to be better. They're going to be prepared, right? So they're going to get these units out faster, meaning the hash rate's going to go up faster. Your yields are going to go down faster. Okay, so a lot of things to consider, but at least now for me personally, at least I have that range. Is it probably going to hit that? Probably not. I mean, like I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if it is between 7 to 9K. A better price that would probably have more people biting is 5 to 7, but even then for me, that's a no-go. Okay, once maybe we get a clearer picture, maybe Ice River debuts their units, Ivy Link debuts their units, and then Bitmain announces theirs, and maybe we see like, okay, it's a pre-order, but not for Q3 or Q4. Then it's like, okay, we have some time. Now maybe I can mess with one of these smaller units. You can kind of play with it more, but you have to look at the hash rate. Again, we saw how fast freaking Caspas went up exponentially and just halved. And then at that point, you could start making kind of predictions. Like, okay, this initial batch, we saw it go up, but it only, instead of going up, doubling, it only went up half of that. They only ended up releasing 500 units. Then we can theorize, okay, every month, maybe it's only half of that. You know what I'm saying? You can start playing with those numbers, do worst case scenario numbers, and see if it kind of is going to make sense, right? And that's kind of how I do my plays, and that's how I try to think about it. But again, it's so hard because those are all things that are out of your control, right? Bitmain can say one thing, and then IB Link drops this monster unit and has 5,000 of them ready to go. And then Bitmain the right after. You know, there's just a lot of factors. That's what you're betting against, and you're betting against something that's going to be, I think, it's going to happen faster than it did with Caspa, right? So for those reasons, for me, probably going to be out. Maybe again if there's ice, but again, if it's anywhere near this price range, bro, like even that AL1 is going to be like 30, 40, 50K alone. Okay, so it's a lot of possibilities because when people see the profitability number, it's gonna be wild, right? And especially if they do pump Alephium goes to $6. Like, it's a lot of things, but just focus on that yield and focus on if it just makes more sense to DC into it or buy some now if you think it's gonna pump or whatever. Because again, a couple days ago it was at $2.20. Or shout out to any guys who got in early back again in October when it was under 20 cents, 12 cents. It's all up to you, right? So think about it. Don't FOMO in. Run some numbers. Run your own projections, right? These are just numbers I'm playing with for easy math purposes. Come up with your own guesses. Come up with your own, like, I think GoldShell's only going to make like 100 units or 200 units. That's what it is, and go for it. Or maybe think worst case scenario. Maybe think even worst case scenario. Okay, it's going to be 2,000 units. Run those numbers. So like for me, when I did all of my things, I look at worst case scenarios and kind of realistic scenarios. But in this case, though, what I will say, it's going to be immensely harder to make any kind of predictions because you have way more factors, way more manufacturers, a lot more variables, right? So like when we're doing them for when the K7 came out and the K3, somewhat easy because it was just Bitmain jumping in. We were accounting for one manufacturer, right? In this case, it's essentially one unit, right? In this case, there's a wide variety of units from going to be like 100, 200 waters to like 3,500 waters. And then all these manufacturers, a lot of things, like it's extreme risk, bros. Just think about it. Not saying it's a good buy or not a good buy. It's totally up to you. I'm just saying from my perspective, I have my range and that's it, right? Most likely going to be out of my range. I'll be just DCing more into Alephium most likely until we get farther down the road, right? So then at this point, though, I maybe would consider it just like I did with Cas Basic and just like I talked about it from the get-go. I'll wait until those 3,000 waters are down under 10K, just kind of like I did with that. Maybe they have a big price drop. Maybe, who knows? Realistically, probably not going to happen either though, because where are we going to be at in 10 months from now? Price is probably going to be through the roof. Chances are Alephium will be 20, 30 bucks. Who freaking knows? Okay. So a lot of risk, bros, a lot of potential rewards though. Again, for any guys who degen, we saw shout out to Greater Good Mining. All those people who did jump in, you just got to see if it's going to be worth it to you and what price points. Okay. So a lot of things can wreck you. Like my biggest concern, I'll throw one last tidbit in, not necessarily the profitability and such, but the price cuts of the next model. If there are price cuts, right? Like that was a big concern. And that's why I jumped in with the KS3M when I did. It was right after a pretty big price cut. And that's what made sense. But again, potentially may not happen here just because the price action may continue up. Okay, so a lot of things to consider, guys. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Did you guys come up with a price point? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Or are you pretty convinced also it is going to be in this $9,000 range, which would be pretty insane, and it's going to be even crazier when they freaking sell out? You freaking degens, like regardless of what I say, you guys love to jump in, and that's cool. I mean, hopefully it works out for you. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just, this is the way my mind works, and this is the way I look at it. This is how I prepare like my thesis for when I go in. That way I have price points and see if it makes sense. Because again, a lot of the times with these things, it makes sense for you to have that price point ready because these things are going to sell out in seconds. That way maybe you are up early at a certain time and it is actually available and you are able to get it at that moment. That way you have that price locked, like, oh man, it's only 2,400. Boom, buying 2 of them. Or man, this thing is freaking 7,500. I'm good. Right? So be ready. Have price points in mind, numbers in mind. Just consider all these factors. Again, let me know, guys, what you guys think. Thank you for watching, guys. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. And I am out.